Hi, y'all. I'm Donna Walker. I'll be moderating the town hall. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes. We're going to thank you all for joining us for the call. So we're going to go back on mute for a couple of minutes, and then we'll go ahead and start around 3 after the hour. Okay. Hi, if you're just joining us, I'm Donna with 1,000 Women Strong. We'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm going to be on mute until the call starts, but just a couple more minutes, letting folks kind of get settled, and then we'll begin. Thank you for being here. Okay, 60-second heads up to our panelists. We're going to go ahead and start the conversation with these wonderful people who have joined us in just a few seconds. I just like to do this because just from past experience, very few people, when I join right on the hour, they're always kind of rolling in the last few seconds. So I just want to give them a chance to get settled, and then we'll go ahead and begin. Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Donna Walker, our Outreach and Partnerships Director at 1,000 Women Strong. And this is the third in our series of town halls, which we're partnering with the ACLU around the issue of student loan debt forgiveness and Black women. For those of you who know something about 1,000 Women Strong, we are an advocacy organization that works to organize and assist organizers around the country on issues that are important to our community. We center Black women always, with the understanding and knowledge and hope that things that help and support our community, of course, will uplift other communities, because we believe that when we thrive, others rise as well. But we'll always look at it first from the angle of how does this benefit Black women? We'll start from there. And if it doesn't, we'll also have that conversation as well. So this is, again, the third in our series of town halls. The first week was 2 weeks ago. We did about a 5-person panel. We had representatives from baby boomers, Gen X, like me, and millennials. And we had a really great conversation. We talked about, oh yeah, this probably impacts Gen Z as well. And then last week, our conversation was with a woman, a wonderful community organizer who is a baby boomer, whose son is Gen Z and in college right now with student loans. And again, I was like, oh, great conversation about people who are Gen Z. And so we want to make sure that we're always talking to and including and elevating the voices of everyone within our community. And student loan debt is something that obviously is hitting this rising generation, Zoomers, extremely hard. The first generation who's actually looking at this debt with full understanding that earlier generations may not have had, that, you know, you may have it. You may just keep on seeing it forever. And yet you don't have any other option if you need to pay for the school you're going to pay for. I'm not going to be leading this conversation. I'll just kind of be setting the ball for our wonderful panelists. So I'm going to get right to introducing them. We're going to have a conversation, and then we're going to go ahead and going to start having questions from you all within the chat feature. So just look to that. All the questions we'll be going through the chat. We'll go ahead and read them out loud, and just ask that you guys share your thoughts, your wisdom.
Hey, Donna, you cut out. Adana, just FYI, you cut out a bit for a portion of what you were saying.
Okay.
Oh, I think I hear you again. Try again.
Okay. So
There
I was,
you are.
oh, wonderful. I'm so sorry, you guys. See, again, technical difficulties, but we're gonna work through them. So Selena, I was hoping that you could introduce yourself to the group.
Hey everyone, how are y'all doing? My name is Selena C. Payne. Oh, okay, my computer is deciding it doesn't want to work today. All right. My name is Selena C. Payne. I go by she, her, hers pronouns. I went to Southwestern University for my bachelor's in feminist studies with a triple minor in human sexuality, sociology, and Spanish. And then I'm currently at Vanderbilt Divinity School trying to get my master's of divinity. I'm a project manager at March On. And even though I was born and raised in Texas, I currently reside in Nashville.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us for this conversation, my fellow Texan. Shay Servino, who, in addition to being a Zoomer, is also a new staff member of 1,000 Women Strong. So welcome in many ways. Can you tell us about yourself, Shay?
Yes, so hi, my name is Shay Lear, Shay for short. I just recently graduated from St. John's University, which is a PWI in Queens, New York. I graduated with 2 bachelor's degrees, one in government and politics, another one in legal studies with a minor in sociology. And I'm currently in my master's program as well at St. John's University. I'm from New York, born and raised, okay? I will stay here forever, probably. And yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Wonderful. Thank you both for joining us for this conversation. We were actually going to have a third panelist, and then she got a little nervous about the fact that we were having this public conversation about student loan debt, and she was worried about what her employer might think of that conversation because of who she works for. And I hear that and feel that. We want to make sure this is a comfortable conversation, but we understand that this issue is very, very sticky for folks, which is why we're trying to bring light to it and a protective bubble around folks because it needs to be dealt with. And we want to make sure that people don't have it weighing them down anyway. So Shay and Selena, you guys have never met before. This is your first meeting, but you guys obviously have in common the fact that you went to PWIs and that you took out student loans to go to school. Selena, can you tell us why you chose why you chose Southwestern in Georgetown and why you took out loans?
Sorry, it's always a fun conversation. So I'm originally, if you know anything about Texas, you can literally be in Texas, be 5 hours away and still be away from home and in Texas. So I'm from Longview. I got accepted to, I think, like 12 different schools. And my grandparents, got sick or whatever. And I was like, well, I'm picking the one that's the closest to home, but far away from home. So I chose Southwestern University. They gave me a pretty decent offer in my head because 3/4 of my tuition is paid for, till you realize it's like $60,000 a year, and $15,000 is a lot if you don't have that. So yeah, that's kind of where my debt was looking. And then now I'm at Vanderbilt and I'm getting a master's, and it's a full ride, but I'm still taking out loans because we're in a pandemic, and it's just, all of us kind of have the fear of this money is going to be for like a rainy day or God forbid if something happens. So yeah.
So we're going to circle back to that secondary issue of taking out loans even when you got a full ride, because it's come up multiple times in conversations. Shay, can you tell us why you chose your university?
Yeah, so I chose it. So I also, very similar to Selena, I applied to many schools here in New York. I applied to, I think, 21 schools. And out of all of them, St. John's gave a really decent offer. Again, same situation in terms of funding. So St. John's is about $55,000 a year. Upwards of the little secret taxes and stuff, it really goes up to $60,000 a year. And so they had given me almost close to a full ride. And so for me, it was oh, this is perfect. I can go to school, I'll be fine. And I put myself through school, so I don't get any financial assistance from anyone. My parents don't pay for school. I've been working, had to work through school. And so for me, I was like, well, if you're paying most of my debt, most of the actual cost, then I should be good. But same situation, if you don't have those $10,000 a year, just for schools, it has to come out as a loan. And so at first I was like, I don't want to take out a loan. Like I was very scared to do so, but then I also had to think about just societal norms and just the fact that like if you don't have a degree, you're not really taken serious, especially as a Black woman. And so at this point, I have to just kind of bite the bullet and take out that loan. And so that kind of accumulated. I'm also my master's program, which is completely not paid for by the city. So here in New York, we have what is like FAFSA, which everyone pretty much knows. But New York City also gives out funding to students as well. But once you hit your master's, like they don't pay for anything at all. So it's about 40,000 a year for the master's program, completely out of pocket, no financial aid, no nothing else. So that's gonna definitely hit once that's acquired.
You know, it's amazing to think about the fact that we are told from an early age that we have to go to college, but we also get excited about the idea of growing up and going to college and hopefully getting away from home if that works out for us, or being able to just have the choice, like Selena, of a bunch of different options to choose from. But then when it comes down to it, even if you get scholarships and support, you still have to live. You still have to live in some very expensive cities, or you live in a city that may not be as expensive, but getting there and getting back and forth is expensive. And you have classmates who don't have that experience. So can you talk to me a little bit about what that is like? You know, you're sitting there, you're working hard, you're going for the same degree, and you've got classmates who have no understanding of what it means to have to take out loans and work and try to get on the dean's list. And either one of you, both of you can talk about that.
I could definitely jump in on this one because I had students in school literally drive in with a Dodge Charger, a Tesla, like all of these fancy cars. And I'm just like, I'm taking the bus. You know, I'm trying to get to class. I have to go to work. I have to do all these things. And so it was very hard, especially in the field of government and politics, because it's already a male-dominated space, a white male-dominated space already, and especially in classes. And so I had the breakdowns of, you know, if it's the class of 25, I'll be lucky if there's 5 Black people in that class, right? And then so having that aspects of it, and then also just being able to think about, you know, internships or even job opportunities. There's so many students that were able to take those unpaid internships and really build up their resumes because they didn't have to worry about paying for school, they worry about how am I rent, I have to do all these other things. And so that definitely played a role into just overall what stage are you at versus me, and what opportunities can you take advantage of that I just couldn't. And then I know there was a question about what is a PWI. PWI is a private white institution. And that's basically just a school that is majority white people, and it's a private school. Pretty like, you know, pretty simple in that respect. But when you have a small minority demographic, then you really see the differences of like, they're able to kind of just live their life, do whatever they have to do. And then you'll have that group of students that all you see is them running back and forth on campus because they have to get to work, or they're just coming back from work and have to go to class, or they have to do some combination of both in a single day, which was my reality. I had work and school on every day. I worked Monday through Friday. When I wasn't, I did do retail for a little bit, but then I was able to finally get into my field of law in that time. So I was able to work as a paralegal, but if you know anything about the legal system and just like law in general, it's usually Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And so I would have to take that, you know, 9:05 class really early and then run back to work in the afternoon. So that dynamic was very difficult. And then a lot of students didn't have that same experience because they didn't need to. They could very easily go to their unpaid internship because they didn't have to worry about putting food on their table or anything else.
Great, thank you for sharing that experience. Selena, you were in Georgetown, Texas, which for those who don't know is a small town in the Central Texas Hill Country. So what was your experience like with all of the barriers that Shay is talking about, but in a kind of a more rural setting?
Yes. Well, I'm originally a country girl. And if you know anything about Texas, our public transportation system is non-existent. Like, you know, Houston probably has a couple of buses or something like that. And so I agree with everything that Shay said. The only problem is in the rural area, it's like a necessity to have a car. And then there's a level of affluence that can happen whenever you don't need a car. Like you can use like little food shipping services to like, you know, bring stuff to your dorm or whatnot, or your parents will send you a care package or whatnot, versus like I needed a car in order to get to the grocery store and like get meds and all this other stuff, just because, you know, like Shay said, I was like one of the few Black kids. Like when when I got into Southwestern, I think I was like one of like maybe 100 out of like 1,400 kids, like 100 Black kids out of like 1,400 Black kids, 1,400 total students. So I'm just like, I don't know. That's kind of what I think about though. It's just like the necessities for what you need in like rural areas versus what you need in like urban areas is so different. It's definitely different.
And
Yeah.
that impacts the amount of money you've got to take out for loans, in addition to what you need for tuition, room and board. And both of you have kind of talked about that. You know, you're working, other students are not, they don't kind of have the same understanding of it. You know, I keep getting stuck on the statistic that a Black woman with a bachelor's degree makes the same amount of money as a white man with an associate's degree or less. And a Black woman with a master's degree might make the same amount of money as a white man with a bachelor's degree. So master's, Black woman, bachelor's, white woman, I'm sorry, white man. So basically to keep up, we have to be more educated, which means we have to take out more debt. And that means it starts a cycle. So you've talked about some of the things. You've got to have a car. You've got to pay the light bill. If you're living off campus, laundry, all that kind of stuff. Well, if you're living on campus also. So when you were deciding how much to take out in loans as like a teenager, how did you come to that understanding of what amount of money you could take on and you were going to need in order to live?
I'm 23 and I still don't know how much money I'm supposed to take out. So it's been 5 years since I've been in this. Like that's a whole job career experience, taking out loans. Yeah, I still don't know. And I feel like this pandemic made everything worse. Like I got a full ride and I'm working full time. So I should be able to pay for, you know, all the extra stuff. But with the pandemic, you know, I was homeless the first time in the beginning of the pandemic. I didn't want that to happen ever again during the pandemic. So I just kept taking out extra loans. I was like, okay, well, you know, at least if I have $1,000, you know, I'll be able to get a hotel, or like, at least if I have this. So I can imagine what's going to happen like as a stress response, you know, for everyone else. Like, you know, you have a year or two left in school and now you're like, well, I have to take out more loans because what if the next pandemic is even worse? Or what if there's, you know, yeah.
I mean, just think about that you were this highly educated woman going for her master's degree and homeless and having to take out more debt just to survive in the middle of the worst disaster to happen to, you know, the world, you know, in generations. I just can't imagine how scary, you know, that was for you. And I think probably also disappointing because that's not what you expected to have happen once you got that first degree and started in the second one. I don't want to speak for you, but I'm just kind of imagining that would just fill me with rage.
It was, I mean, it was interesting because I felt like I had finally got into another job and I was like excited. And then the pandemic happened and then, yeah, like you just couldn't afford anything because like, you know, certain jobs just kind of wasn't hiring or whatever. It was interesting. And I've heard from like other friends that it was like worse for them or whatnot, of like domestic violence in a lot of places, you know, which that also like impacts student loans because it's like now you're like taking out extra loans to like flee a dangerous situation, which is like, you know, I don't know. I feel like that was a very depressing conversation, but that's the reality. I mean,
Yeah, I mean that's real and something that we do not talk about. A lot of people think that student loan debt is just about the tuition, and I think it's why some people are so hardcore on not wanting to support anyone else having forgiveness of student loan debt because they paid theirs. But like if you're a Gen Xer, we came out into a booming economy, you know, and so the world was different for us, and many of us, you know, still were struggling to, you know, to pay different bills, but the world looked different for us than it looked for you all as you, enter the world of work. Um, if you had it to do again, Selena and Shay, would you take out loans? Is there some other angle that you know now at the ripe old age of 22 and 23 that you would do differently?
That's such a hard question to answer. Um, I don't know if I would take out loans again. I think so. For me, in New York City, there is a CUNY system in which it's technically free, but not really free at the same time. It's cheaper than other alternatives than St. John's and any other PWI or any other private school in New York. And so that is a cheaper route. And so I think that if I had to look back, I would look at those schools a little bit more closely in terms of for my bachelor's degree. I think that I would still try to go to a notable school, especially because it's in my field. Like it's such a weird dynamic because like with the school that I'm at in New York and in my field, it's very recognizable and people know St. John's because of it. And so I think that kind of gives, and the reason why I chose it, in addition to all other reasons, was I knew that it would be able to put me in a higher level when I got into the job market. And again, like being already a minority in that field, like I felt like I needed something to kind of like set me apart from anyone else. But in the same breath, I'm looking at it now and I'm like, I have 6 months before they start knocking on my door to start paying, right? And so it's just like looking at that aspects of it and looking at the overall fact that when it comes to student loans, we're the hardest hit every single time. And so it would be a more in-depth outlook for me in terms of whether or not I would still choose St. John's in terms of having to take out those loans versus another school. But it's just a lot of factors as to why I chose a school and why I had the debt that I have. And so I feel like, being realistic, I probably would do it again just because I know that the outlook is better. But just looking at the time period that we're in, like you have a lot of us who are just recent graduates, right? With the bachelor's degree class of 2021, and we're walking into a non-existent job market. And so it's like, I would hope that St. John's would kind of help me elevate myself in my field, but in the same breath, timing when it comes to the job market is so different for everyone in every generation. And so looking at it now, it's like, is St. John's really even doing anything for me because of this pandemic? And in hindsight, like if that was possible, I probably would have been like, it doesn't matter because the job market is still trash and it's not doing anything. But yeah, I just feel like there's so many factors to that and so many factors to why people take out student loans. And I think, we're in a situation that we really feel like we have no choice but to take it out. And that's the constant thread of it.
and sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, something I also think is really interesting is when we hear conversations about like millennials and their student debt or whatnot, and how like, millennials are a group of individuals that lived through like 2 crises and all. And I'm just like, as a Gen Z, I have as well. Like I've lived through these same exact experiences y'all just and this isn't a battle of the, who got it worse, but it's just funny because like it hit millennials obviously as they were going through it, but it hit us like in our developmental phase where we're like, we grew up we grew up with our parents and everything saying, oh, well, you can, you should be able to get a house and you should be able to do this and this and that, while simultaneously seeing like our older cousins and like aunties or whatever, like suffering from like the economic crises or whatever, or like housing, market. Like we're watching this stuff. And I don't know. I think that's like a conversation that doesn't really happen a lot, of like millennials are going through a lot. And we went through all of that like at like 8 and 9 and stuff. And
Yeah, I definitely agree.
That's why I wanted to have this conversation. And next time we have this conversation, Shay, you will be leading it. I just want you to know that. And I will just be watching. But because we don't know y'all's lives. We think we do. But I remember exactly where I was in 1997. I was teaching 5th grade. It was like a year of like tumult. My grandmother died. I had a catastrophic car accident, all that kinds of stuff. I remember 1997 so clearly. And yet that's the first year of Gen Z. And just for those who aren't aware, the oldest members of Gen Z are 24 and the youngest are 6 years old. So that's an incredible gap in terms of how they see the world in the knowledge base. And I think a lot of people and older generations are still stuck on the idea of millennials as 12-year-olds, which is like so wrong and weird and unfair. But because of that, then we can't even think of the folks who are younger than them, who are already rising up and dealing with debt and life and seeing all this from a completely different angle than any of our other generations have seen it from. I want to open this up to questions now, because I'm sure that there are other members of your generation on who want to speak up and speak up your writing and share, and other folks who are, boomers, Xers, millennials who have their own story or see something very similar in what you all are describing. But it just really hits me to think about that. It's so easy for us to talk over, which I want to do now. It's so easy for us to talk over folks instead of just having them in the conversation. So as I'm doing that, I'm also going to drop a link into the chat because it is an article about HUD Secretary Marsha Fudge, former Congresswoman Marsha Fudge, who made remarks this week about how student loan debt is particularly hurting the ability of Black Americans to become homeowners. I mean, just debt on top of debt on top of debt, and the banks will take your money in terms of like interest payments, but then give you the option for a mortgage. It's not happening. So I'm dropping that into the chat right now. It's a long, ugly kind of link. I have a couple others that I want to share as well. But please, if you got a question, if you got a comment you'd like to share, I really appreciate the person who asked for an explanation of what PWI is, because I think sometimes we just forget that these terms are not universal. PWI, HBCU, obviously historically Black college and university, is not very obvious to everybody. So with that, any questions? Or if Selena and Shay, it's a conversation. If you guys have a question for each other, I would love for you guys to just feel free to have that. Or if you want to yell at Gen X for a minute, please go for it.
I can't yell at Gen X because I feel like Gen X is the reason why like Gen Z is so cynical and like nihilistic, honestly. Y'all were going through a lot.
You're first. The middle child, yes.
Y'all were going through a lot back then, and we appreciate y'all because
I feel guilty like we didn't do enough though. When I see how you all are leading on every issue, on protest, on activism, I think about you and millennials. I think, gosh, like we could have been there. We were there, and then we walked away from it. What was going on? And for a lot of us, like seriously, though our generation has always to deal with debt, we did walk out into an economy that we were told was thriving and that was going to be thriving forever. Jobs were out there. You were going to come out of college making $50,000, which in 1995, 96, like that was great. Like now it's like, okay, but it was great back then. And it's a different world. I see some comments right now. Let's see here. Oh, there's also a link being put in there for those who want to sign the petition about canceling $50K in student loan debt. This is a work that your Senator Shay is leading on, Chuck Schumer, along with Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, to get that 50K of student loan debt canceled. They're also working on the issue of extending the hold on student debt with banks past March, another 6 months, to at least September of 2022. So those are issues that we definitely want to be lobbying folks on, but we also want you to know that there are folks in office who are working on them as well. Let's see here. I'm trying to read into the chat to see if I've got any questions. Okay. Oh, somebody may have come in late. Karen asking what a PWI is. PWI, predominantly white institution, private white institution, as opposed to HBCU, historically Black college or university. Both of them are going to be expensive. I went to Spelman. One of my dearest friends just let me know last night that he is returning to Morehouse in August to finish his senior year, which originally was scheduled to be 1994-95. And for him, again, for so many people, it comes down to money. But now he has the time, and he is moving back to Atlanta from California to get that last year done and to move on from there. But that's what people are dealing with. See, we've got a great comment here. Very good story. Great that Ms. Fudge is taking a stand for us. I'm interested in whether interest rates can be more fair for those of us with crippling debt loads. I can't help but wonder if President Biden is beholden to the financial institutions behind the federal student loan program. That is a great question. Go ahead, Selena.
Okay. I was just going to say, and I don't know about Shay, but when I first was looking at this, I didn't look at interest rates. I'm just now looking at interest rates, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I still don't know what any of it means. I feel like when I hear about 8% or 3% or whatever, I'm just like, I don't know what that actually means. I'm a divinity student, not a mathematician. I'm just gonna let y'all know, most pastors don't know math. So yeah, for me, I think like the student interest rate definitely just didn't have an impact. Like for me, I just wish everything was like more cut and dry. Like, this is how much you're going to owe over 10 years, like a car payment. Like if it made sense like a car payment, that would, I don't know, I think that would help, because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I definitely did look at interest rates. I didn't really know the difference between variable and, well, fixed variable and I forgot the name of the one, fixed variable, and then the other one. And for me, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm very confused. And so I just kind of Googled and everything. But then I also looked at different banks and what those interest rates were. And for me, what I had to decide was, is the fixed interest rate higher than the flexible one they have? And 9 out of 10, the flexible one was cheaper. Well, not cheaper, but the percentage rates were lower. So that's exactly what I went off of. I'm like, if it's less, that means you're going to charge me less interest. So I'm just going to go with that. But it was an issue of, I don't know what the number amount is. So I definitely agree with Selena. Like, I wish that it was more cut and dry of like, this percent means that you're going to pay $50 of interest every month or whatever, right? Like, I wish it was just more clear, more understandable, and broken down to that extent, so that we know exactly what's that number going to look like, how much is it going to jump, and we can make more conscious decisions about which ones are better to get and which ones are cheaper, which bank is better to get from, and things like that. But we know that these things are not cut and dry on purpose. And so keeping that in dry just kind of really highlights the fact that we need more education on, and more people in the finance world to kind of help us out, because me in finance, Selena, I agree with you, girl. That's not my thing. Only numbers that I know is maybe a budget, and that's at most. Like, that's it. I know how much I need to spend and how much money I have left, and that is about it. So really getting more people, and really just more Black people in general in all of these different fields that we really need support in, because it's not that and I say this with all of my heart, I don't believe it's going to be the same getting financial advice from a white person than a Black woman or someone who is Black. And I think that disparity does exist for a reason. And so getting more people in that field is going to be like the number one goal, so that we can get more educated on it. Because I'm 22 years old, I'm taking out so many loans at this point, and I still don't know what these percentages are at all.
I mean, this is just it's so important. Because we're talking about some of this is financial literacy, but really it's more transparency. Corporate transparency, government transparency, why they obscure this information when they don't have to. Same as like with health insurance and bills, that they make it hard for us to get information and answers when you have no choice but to go ahead and sign your name there. And doing it at the age of 17 or 18 or 23, trying to answer questions and navigate a system that adults in their 40s and 50s still are scared to deal with. Just doesn't make any sense. So I see from Ruthie Bond's great point, Selena, I think that if they could explain it a little more, the total number amount that would help you to decide better what works best for you, like what number you're going to end up with. I think that car analogy is great because it's like, okay, it's a 5 or a 7 year loan. You're going to pay this much. You're going to owe this much if you pay it off early. As opposed to with student loan debt, I know people who paid it off early and their credit ratings dropped because they no longer had $50,000, $100,000 in debt, which is so backwards. Okay, Sophie says the compounding interest on student loans are a killer. The entire formula should be revised. Got a question for you, Shay. Given your political focus, do you see having a Black woman in the White House who has garnished accolades in higher education, making the possibility of having student loan debt supported by policy more likely? I kind of messed it up. Let me say it again. Given your political focus, do you see having a Black woman in the White House who has garnered accolades in higher education? I'm sorry, y'all. It's these glasses. Make the possibility of having student loan debt supported by policy more or less likely?
Honestly, my answer would be hopefully. Hopefully by having someone like Kamala Harris in office and in literally the second highest power known to man would do something for us. I have a very unpopular opinion on our vice president. And so I really do just hope that she is able to amplify the voices of people that haven't been centered in the conversation ever, and that she can advocate for them in the position that she's in. But as of right now, it seems that, we are on the work that we're doing right now with the 100K Women Strong, right? Like we are trying to get this to be passed, or trying to get our elected officials or people in the highest position of power to see this as a problem. And the fact that we have to go to these lengths even to get that recognition, and the conversation to even get started at the fact that Black women proportionally have higher rates of student loans. Gen Z, 73% of Gen Z have debt, right? And 8% have less than $25,000. Like you could just imagine the amount of debt that we have just as a generation alone. And so we know that student loans are the number one way that cripples our ability to even, again, become homeowners, to be able to really build ourselves, to start our own business, to kind of really branch out and really give back to society and to ourselves, right? And so when we have this conversation, and the fact that we have to have it in such rates because it's not being heard, it's like, how much more can we do to get this to be fixed, right? Like that's really what it comes down to. We just want our student loans dismissed. Like we want that gone. And so it's just like, it's something so simple that can impact so many of us, but yet even having someone like Kamala Harris in office, we're still having to fight the same fight. So I don't know how much more or what of a difference having her there is going to do. I think that if that was an issue that she was centering, I think that can definitely change the conversation that we're even having, but it's not. And so it's more of, how do we get it to that? Like, how do we get this conversation to get to these elected officials and to these people who are in these positions of power to be able to do that? And I think that's exactly the work that we're doing now, which is let's round up the support behind it. Let's tie the tough conversations. Let's have the conversations that no one else is talking about, and bring it to the center stage that we can force our elected officials to listen. And so I hopefully that answered the question, but I don't know how much of a difference that she would do individually, but I think that when it comes to people power and us collectively organizing behind it, that's where we're going to see the most change.
Fantastic. Great question. wonderful answer.
Oh, Adana, you cut out again. Oh, Adana, you cut out. Oh, and you froze. Oh no. Sorry, guys, we're having technical difficulty. There we go.
Oh, okay, great. We talk about generational wealth. We also need to talk about generational poverty. There's a new report out from the Brookings Institute that one of my favorite people on Twitter just shared that basically talks about the devastating impacts of, generational poverty on our community, and how we are much more likely to remain in poverty across generations than white folks are. And that's because we're starting from an angle of not having money 3 generations ago to buy a home, not having the government actually fund, your GI Bill or the loan that you needed. But they did fund for somebody else. Like my grandfather fought in World War II and he didn't get a GI Bill. Like, come on now, what? He and my grandmother didn't get access to, to the housing that was available to white GIs. And that's the story for so many of our folks. So I'm going to find that link and I'm going to share it with you guys because it was really depressing, but I think it was also helping to keep the stakes high in this conversation that yes, we do want to have with Vice President Harris and President Biden. The question earlier about whether he's beholden to financial institutions. I mean, Delaware is home to many of the nation's banks. And I think it's a fair question that we need to ask. In our first call, Shakia was asked a similar question about engaging Vice President Harris. And she said, you know what, we want to have a conversation, not a duel. And I like that because it's like, yeah, we aren't going in there antagonistic, but we do expect a conversation. And we need to have many of these conversations about this issue and how it's impacting us in different ways, different parts of the country, different angles. So with that, Selena, you are in divinity school. So you're not looking to come out and make $1 million. Like, you and your classmates, what is that like? Like, you're going out to serve the Lord, but you're going to go into debt to do so. Like, how does that change, like, what you see as possibilities and your opportunity when you know that the career choice that you want is not one that's designed to make you wealthy?
Oh, Lord. I mean, I will say that finances and like classes like that are getting added into like the curriculum now, just because, the church is a business or whatnot. The church is a nonprofit typically. So like, that's something that's like a way that the institution is kind of like trying to shift and change a little bit. So they can kind of accommodate for that. Me personally, and I said this in joking with you, Idana, I'm not paying these loans back. They're not getting paid back. This is part of my reparations. I should go to school for free. And I know this is like what a lot of baby boomers talk about, the entitlement that Gen Z and millennials have, but like, no, I deserve it. You deserve it too. You've been and deserved it, but I'm just letting you know that I appreciate all the work you did because I deserve that and I'm reclaiming that now. So
do you find that that's a common theme and a common thought process that like, okay, thanks for those loans and now I'm moving on with the rest of my life?
Almost definitely. I'm definitely what's her name? Ariana Grande in it. Thank you, next. I'm done. I'm not paying these loans back. And I'm just hoping that, with the kind of work that I'm doing that I want to do, diversity and education and inclusion work and, politics and all this other stuff, I'm just hoping that either that makes me enough money to where I can pay these loans off and, I'll find it somewhere in my heart where I want to pay them off. Or that the government's just going to forgive it, either A, because reparations are necessary. And it was one of the things that we asked for. We didn't ask for Juneteenth, but whatever. It's a different conversation. And yeah, I'm part of the diaspora. Like, me getting my master's is part of the, is part of the reason why like our ancestors like died, were murdered, I don't know. I'm the first in my family to even get this far, and especially to do it without a child. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that also impacts a lot of stuff. Like, I'm the first in my family to get this far with no kids, and not married or whatnot. Versus like in, when they were growing up, that would be like, what? Why are you 23 and not looking? You ain't got a boo or nothing, you know?
That's real. I mean, that's real. And I think we kind of underestimate the impact it has on folks who are doing this all on their own, which Black women consistently are doing. Loving family, people who want to help and support, but yeah, those debts remain your debts, not yours and a spouse's. You are responsible for yourself and often your parents and some children and nieces and nephews and all that kind of stuff. Like, you are making yourself available to the entire family and the community. And then there's this pressure that's brought on by big banks and corporations who buy up student loan debt and want you guys to handle it. There's a question that kind of ties in with what you were just saying. With the realities of debt and the job hunt struggle, why do you think it's important to go ahead and finish school?
Do you want to answer it, Shay? Or?
You could go first.
Okay. I think it's important to go to school simply because I don't know what else there is to do. That's the other part. The other problem about doing things by yourself is that you don't have anyone else to redirect you into a different route or whatnot. And then when you do have people that, open your eyes to, new things or whatever, you're skeptical of it because you don't know anyone that's went on that path. I have a mentor that, we talk all the time, and he'll be like, oh, just don't worry about school. Like, you got a good job and you're going to whatever. And at the same time, I'm like, yes, that makes sense. Logically, it makes sense for me to focus on this that's making me money, because this will build skills and all this other stuff. But in the back of my head, I've always been taught, oh no, get the degrees, get the accolades, get all of this other stuff. And then all that other, because the same thing happened to our parents of like, they were working there for a long time or whatever. And then all of a sudden they got replaced by like a 22-year-old with a master's degree.
And no experience.
Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to, and then Gen Z is struggling with the fact that we have to balance both of like, it's even crazy to see the difference between me and my siblings of like, for me, AP classes and like IB classes were kind of like still getting worked into our system or whatnot. Like, we had AP classes and that made sense, but like the online dual credits and everything just didn't really make a lot of sense or whatnot. And I didn't know what was the purpose of it because I was pushed and directed towards AP classes. My siblings, on the other hand, automatically were like, no, I'm going to make sure I have the guaranteed courses and I'm going to take this. And just because like the information is out there and it makes more sense to them, like, why not have guaranteed math credits in classes versus like take an AP test where you have to make a certain score for it even to count for some schools. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that made sense. I'm sorry.
Makes a ton of sense. Shay, you want to add on?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think we were kind of, I don't want to say brainwashed, but we were low-key brainwashed into thinking that like if you didn't have your degree, like you're not going to be successful. And I think that hopefully times are changing and we can kind of see it now where it's like there's less focus on getting that degree, but I always have to bring it back to who I am, right? Like, as Black women, we have to work 10 times harder just to get to the same level of a white man. And so I think that it's still important to get a degree if that's something that you need, but I also want to push more for entrepreneurship, because I think that conversation has also been left. Especially as Gen Z, no one really talked to us about entrepreneurship and owning your own business. And that's not even a Gen Z thing, like even millennials and Gen Z, like we've been kind of left out of the conversation of like another path that isn't school, right? And so I think that school is not for everyone. We've seen it all throughout probably our lives, that school is not for everyone. And so I think that it's okay to have the conversation of becoming your own business owner and having and doing entrepreneurial, but in the same breath, they'll always tie it back to like, well, you should get a degree in business management. You should get a degree in accounting and things like that. And so it's like, I think overall, we're going to need the degree because that's kind of what the societal norm is. And we're not really in a place yet where that isn't necessary. But in terms of the job market now, and the realities of job hunting. I know that was part of the question too. Like, it sucks. There's barely any jobs out there right now. And just being able to compete for the job is 10 times hard. So it's like you can apply for 100 jobs and you might get a call back from 2 of them. The ratio is something like that. And so it's just like people are struggling to find a job, but then in the same breath, and again, going back to what Selena said earlier about people thinking that Gen Z is entitled, we're not willing to put up with $12 an hour jobs anymore. Right. And I think that the pandemic also showed that we're not going to do that. We're not going to work for the bare minimum. Like, that's just not what we're going to do. And even 15, like, that's a whole nother conversation as well. But $50 an hour is not enough either. Right. And so we have to have the bigger conversation of inflation, right? Like inflation, cost of living in the areas that you're in, and how much do you really need to be able to just live a decent life? Because I think that's the biggest conversation. Can you live a decent life right now? And it's like, no, we can't. And then, so it's like, what else do we have but to get this degree that's said to be that if you have that degree, you can make more money. And so it's just like having to kind of constantly fight that ladder of success and fighting the ladder of just salaries and incomes, and then adding the fact that we're women, adding the fact that we're Black women at that. It's just like, at this point, let me get this degree because this is my survival. Like, I need to get this degree for survival. And I think that that's the conversation that most people don't really talk about.
And I agree with you on that too. And I would even add the fact that I would add on to there that when it comes to like that conversation about entitlement or whatnot, that as someone brought it up in here when they were talking about the counseling or whatnot, even though we grew up with the internet or whatnot, the internet is still like a skill that needs to be, the internet is still a skill that needs to be learned or whatnot. I applied to grad school by myself, and I'm still trying to figure out how to apply to a PhD. So I don't know. I'm just thinking about all this other stuff. I think I'm gonna get to my original point with the first part, where I think it's worth finishing school simply just because at the end of the day, you can have that piece of paper just to say, I have a master's or I have a bachelor's or I have a PhD, because it seems like nowadays, no one cares what it actually says. Like, nobody turns around and asks me, oh, well, what did you get a degree in? Are you in your field? You know, I had a feminist studies degree, you know, and now I work at a nonprofit. So, I mean, does it line up? Maybe, but I mean, would it also line up if I had like a business degree? I don't know.
Yeah, I want to actually ask the question that Janine put into the chat, because I think someone you referenced about counseling. Shouldn't thorough counseling happen at the point of considering the loan amount? Students are usually totally clueless as to what happens when they graduate. They don't do the math, or rarely, or we're lucky enough to have someone ask them to sit down and make a special spreadsheet of what, for once, when they graduate, about apartment rent, utilities, food, car insurance, et cetera, and a massive monthly loan payment on top of that. And then they sign their lives away. They don't think about how it all adds up when it's time to start paying it back. I think that's a great idea. It sounds like it would have been helpful to you guys to have that type of counseling, loan counseling.
Yeah, go ahead if you. I would definitely say that counseling is essential and very important overall. But I do want to just take it back to what I said earlier in terms of sometimes taking out these loans is for survival. And so it's just like, even if we are thinking about the repayment or 4 years from now I have to pay this back, it's like, but right now I need this. Right now I need to take this out because I have to put food on my table, or I have to get to work, or I have to get to school. And so it's just kind of like, yes, it's great, but it's not everything, if that makes sense. And so I think in the bigger conversation is like, well, how can we get more transparency from banks in order to know which one is our best options in terms of interest? I think it's gonna always, like, in my opinion, I think it's gonna go always back to interest. Which one of y'all gonna make me pay less? That's the one I'm gonna go with, right? And so I think that if we change the conversation and make them compete to give us the lower interest, you know, that works out in our favor to some extent. other than like maybe not having to pay for school or, you know, something like that. But definitely, you know, we're going to need them. So it's just like, how can we make it work for us instead?
Yep, make it work for you. So to that point, so our first week we had a baby boomer panelist who said, I know I'm going to die with my debt. And that just kind of stuck with me. And she was like, but I'm still going to live in the meantime. And she was taking that from kind of an angle of like joy. She was still going to have joy in her life. She was still going to thrive, be an entrepreneur, get more degrees because she wanted them for herself. So what gives you all joy? And what do you look forward to doing separate and apart from this money hanging around, calling your name? Like, what gives you joy?
I'm still trying to figure that out. I feel like that's part of like our issue is we're being, this kind of goes back to the last question of like, I feel like kind of one of the issues that are happening is like there's a lot of jobs that are being created for us in the time we live right now in order to prepare us for the future, when we're the ones that actually have all the adequate skills for these jobs. But we're told that we have to have 10 years experience to do jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that's something that, you know, just like I said, I went back to that. I was a barista when I was a freshman in college, and now I work at a nonprofit. Like those are completely different salaries. So like when you get in and you're doing the counseling or whatnot, like being a college student in general, being in your 20s, your teens and your 20s is just so unpredictable and like unstable in general. There's no amount of counseling that would make sense for me to be like, okay, I owe $105 every month. I'm a barista. I only make like $400 a month, you know, on top of going to school, you know. And then now I've gotten to the point where, like I said, I'm at the point where I don't even want to think about how much loans I have because I'm like, I'm not paying it back. It's not getting paid back because I'm in the endless cycle of I can't pay the student loan off because I'm in debt. So I'm going to take out more debt so I could pay for like other necessities. And the only debt that I have is like student debt. And I feel like and the last thing I'll say and I'll be done. I feel like I don't know if this is a thing and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like culturally there's kind of like this idea that student debt is like a lesser evil than any other debt. Because like, I know for me, I've definitely paid for like, you know, or I'm paying for like all my other debts or whatever, like car and everything like that. But there's not like a heavy obligation, it feels like in the Black community to like pay off student loans simply because it doesn't really affect too much when you're younger. I want to say. And then when you get older and you're trying to like buy a house and you have a family and stuff, all of a sudden it like kicks you in the face. So.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that, like 100%. And in terms of like what gives me joy, I love organizing. That's like my happy space. Like that's where I'm like, I'm here, I'm doing it, and like I'm gonna make it happen. So I think just organizing overall, it's stressful, right? It's very stressful, but it's also something that I really, really love to do. And just being able to bring people together behind different issues, different campaigns, like that's my joy. I wish I didn't have to go through debt to be able to do it, but you know, we're here.
Joy is when you use that last $40 from your refund and get like a meal and like finally wash your clothes. That's what joy is.
Yes. So you could be like, I'm gonna treat myself and I'm gonna go get these nachos. I sure am.
So in the world that you organize, what does college look like? What does higher education look like in the world that you all organize and have prayed and ministered to us over to make these changes that need to be made?
You mean like, I just want to make sure I answer it correctly. Like, can you rephrase the question?
So basically what I'm asking is, okay, so you're 22 right now. your generation start is the youngest is 6 years old. So if there's something that you can do, if you had the magic wand to do everything, for that 6-year-old and for those younger or not yet born, that get you farther than we in Gen X got you and baby boomers and before that got us. Like, what does that world look like to you? Like, is it free education for all? Is it
Just one? Just one?
Oh, maybe.
Do I have to pick just one?
You don't have to pick just one.
Oh, listen, okay. Free education, free healthcare, a sustainable world with quality food around us. We need good food options in our Black communities because that does not exist. We need no police in schools. We need no police in general. We need more community care, more community care in terms of social services. I would end homelessness. I'm gonna leave some for Selena, but listen, the list is long.
No, I 100% agree. Like, I 100% agree. Like, I also believe in, like, renewable resources, which would be nice, universal health, childcare, and I think we need to have a real conversation about, like, the fact that our generation is kind of doing it China, how we're not having enough children and we're not going to be able to sustain and, like, have a real conversation
So
on,
true.
like, can we have a real conversation on why, we're not having children, but we have so many STDs and STIs, and, like, having that kind of conversation of, like, where are the resources in the institution going to for, like, stuff like that? Like, cool, you're passing out condoms in, like, colleges or whatnot.
I agree. I want some critical race theory. Okay, I want a change in curriculum.
I want the fact that, like, Lil Nas X, him kissing another man on national television, I want that not to be as big of an issue as R. Kelly. Not R. Kelly. Well, yeah, actually,
Bill Cosby.
Period. Or Bill Cosby. I was like, R.
You
Kelly,
freed.
all of them. Like, I'm tired of it. Like, but I feel like that is Gen Z kind of pushing, because Lil Nas X is our age too. I feel like that is Gen Z pushing its way into, like, saying, kind of F the standards or whatever and F the status quo or whatnot. And I think it's kind of a beautiful thing because, for, like, Shay and me, we're cuspies, we're on the cusp of millennial Gen Z. Yeah, we were literally taught that it was either military because we grew up in the patriotism era, especially for me and her. So either you go to the military or you go into school. Like, there's no in between, like, because there's no such thing as a workforce. Like, there's no workforce. And I think that was an option that got taken away from us, was, like, we were never told to, like, go to, you can get a job or whatever, and then go to school. We were told, go to school or go to the military because the military is going to pay for your school, which was a lie that they told the Black and brown, that's the whole thing. But yeah,
I know so many people who did that military to school pipeline who are just very angry because they felt lied to, and because obviously they didn't want to be in a position where they felt like it was like picking up a gun against somebody they didn't even know to pay for books.
Yep. And can we also, the last thing I would say is, like, can we talk about how we're also some of the most depressed generation we out here? It is really sad. Like, I think part of the depression is, like, the student loan debt, and that's something we have to talk about, of, like, I've had a friend that I knew that used student loans to pay for an abortion. I had a friend that, is using student loans to, I've heard about people using student loans to pay for, like, mental health resources or whatnot. Like, student loans is that gap insurance for life. Like, that's literally what it is. And I think there's something, like, really depressing when you have to, you realize, oh, I graduated med school, law school, divinity school, get your BFA, whatever, your MFA or whatever, and you realize that you have, like, $50,000 to $100,000 in debt, and there's nothing you can do about it. What are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is something so depressing about that, and just knowing that it's always going to be there. And even if you pay it off, like, there's still repercussions, like your credit score might drop or whatnot, or you're still not eligible for certain programs or whatnot. It's a hot mess.
You know, and just thinking about this conversation, I was really nervous because I didn't want to overtalk anybody. I didn't want to kind of prejudge what you guys might say, and I just feel full just from what you have shared with us. I was worried about myself as a Gen Xer and how I was going to input the information that you guys are giving out, and of course, as always, you all come through. Just with so much to think about. I mean, you're touching on issues this week that we have not talked about previously. That'll be really helpful to us as we continue to build this program around student loan debt, but also our other programs with 1,000 Women Strong. Excuse my poodle, I'm sorry. And I'm so sorry. It was good for the first hour. But it's important to us. I mean, the questions that I'm seeing from you all in the chat are also so incredibly helpful as we look to build together resources to add to our website, to help our organizers who go out into the field, us as we do our outreach and our partnerships beyond our partnership with the ACLU. And we're so thankful to them for getting involved with us. You know, they're not an organization known for being involved with the Black community or Black women in particular. And because of that, they were like, yes, we want to be involved. And Shakia is our amazing leader. And I've worked with her several times before. First met her on the Abrams campaign in 2017. And so I know her heart and how important this issue is, and that we not leave anybody out of the conversation or the leadership on this issue, which is why I say, Shay, that when we have another conversation about this, the part 2, you will be leading and I will be someplace in the chat. Because we need unfiltered understanding of what's happening, how this impacts you, mental health, just the choices you have to make. I mean, abortion, we hadn't talked about that, but it made me think about the friend of mine who's part of her student loan on an abortion, you know, in 1992. And we're in a world now where that, of course, choice is, you know, in peril. So I want to thank you all and ask if there's anything else you want to leave us with, you want us to think about, you want to challenge us to do as an organization or as a community around this issue of student loan debt cancellation as it impacts Black women.
I just wanted to add, and I think that this is why this conversation with Gen Z particularly is so crucial, because I feel like Gen Z is often left out of the conversation if we're not the ones leading it. And I think that just by having this space where Gen Z can kind of come in and be like, no, we are also dealing with this. And I think Selena really brought in the key point of like a lot of the issues that other generations might have had that had gone through. We were going through it at such a young age. And so the effects, I don't want to say it was 10 times worse, but the way that we had to take it at such a young age where we are still developing also impacts us to where we're at now and how we see these issues and why we're advocating for the issues that we are at such a high rate, like the ones that I mentioned before, right? It's like we're at the forefront of these issues because we had to deal with all the things that you guys also had to deal with, you know, millennials, Gen X, and even boomers. At such a young age that impacted us in our mental health. And so really being able to bring in Gen Z into the conversation and not forgetting us, I think that is a crucial part, because 9 out of 10 that we're being left out or we're being labeled as something that we're not. Simply because we're fighting for certain issues or we're advocating for certain issues. And the student debt crisis is also something that we're talking about as Gen Z, because again, we're coming out in a market that does not exist with all the debt that we have. And so it's like, what are we supposed to do at this point when we have nowhere to look to? And so really being able to kind of create space with Gen Z, I think it's very important in all aspects. So I'm just grateful for this space.
Well, thank you for joining us in this space. Selena, what about you?
I just want to say, and this is something I really pray that like our community as a whole kind of like remembers this, of like, don't sleep on humanities and social science kids. If 2020 showed us anything, humanities and social science kids are extremely important, just as important as STEM kids. So like, and funding fine arts and like supporting them, like I feel like just seeing the surge of music and seeing the surge of protests and like protests in like very creative, beautiful ways that like I feel like needs to be written down in history. those are things that I feel like nonprofits and like other organizations do need to lean on more. So of like, I feel like STEM kids have enough support and fine art kids and humanities kids don't. Like, because they're being told that their job is useless because a teacher doesn't make that much money, because a counselor doesn't make that much money or whatever. And if we're living in a system that already is going to underpay us regardless, I feel like we can at least encourage kids to like do something that they're going to enjoy and get a degree in something they're not going to regret for at least the next 15 years.
Mhm. That joy is important. There was another study before we end that I think it was Brookings Institute. I'm not sure. I'll find it and send you guys the link in our recap about the fact that we are facing a real dearth of Black women educators, elementary, middle, high school, because they cannot afford to go into the field anymore because it doesn't pay enough, because they have to go for something higher paying. And so a lot of people who have a passion, they want to serve, they want to teach, they want to be creative. Like you're saying, we're not supporting that. And then it being unsupported, they don't have a choice. If they still want to do that work, how are they going to pay for it, once they get out? Um, so, so Mary Ellen, I want to go ahead. Mary Ellen says, ladies, you have opened my eyes to all of the issues you face. I thank you so much. I want to do what I can to help in the small way I am able to. There are no small ways. Mary Ellen, we're so grateful to you for being part of this conversation, for all of you being part of this conversation. Adriana, our fantastic data director, has been helping to keep us in line. She shared with you a link that I meant to share with you all, but just share with the panelists, from Clever Girl Finance. It's a Black woman's blog, and she's talking about Black women's student debt crisis. I had never heard of her. Would love to meet her now because she's talking about all things, financial literacy for Black women from her angle. And we need to center ourselves in these conversations that we're having, even as they impact other people. Adriana, I don't know if you had any words you wanted to share before we sign off.
Me? No, this was great.
The tech stars always want to stay behind the scenes. Okay, we don't want to forget them though. Thank you all so much. We will be sending a recap email out in the next few days that will have links. Some of the things that we shared here, some new links that we're going to share about just interesting articles or different takes on this topic, whether they impact specifically Black women or the larger community, and the work that's being done to organize around this issue. For those of you who are interested in being in touch with us, please, I see somebody saying, they wanted to email me directly. Yes, absolutely. I want to be in touch with you to talk about things that you can do to help, that we can do to help you as well in your understanding of this issue. But thank you to everyone who took part, to the team who's been involved, and we hope that you all will come back and join us next week. Topic to be decided as we look at this another angle of Black women student loan debt. But thank you again for spending part of your Thursday with us, and I hope you have a wonderful and blessed weekend.